that it was a decent offer, but even if it wasn't, I probably still would have done it because I just knew how badly I wanted to do this. I don't really know how to speak much to that other than it was good enough. It was good enough for me to accept and risk.
Welcome to another episode of the Layover Podcast. I'm Bree, your host. Today we have a special story to tell. Dave is here with us. He went from being a flight attendant to a working pilot, sitting in the right seat and living that life. How you doing, Dave?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So as I said before, the intro is that you worked as a flight attendant and then you said, I'm gonna do a little something else. And you went through all the training and everything it takes. We'll get into that a little bit to become a pilot. Take us back to the beginning. Like, how'd you get into all this?
Yeah, it's a good question. This goes back to about the year 2000. 2015 was the year that I got hired as a flight attendant. I was about a year fresh out of college. I was young, about 20, 23, 24 years old. And I was just working a bunch of odd jobs. And I was actually working at Trader Joe's at the time. And I was working the register, just checking people out, chatting them up. And a guy comes through and I said, "Hey, what are you up to? What do you have going on?" And he goes, "Oh, I might be going to Norway today." And I was like, "Norway? That's interesting. What do you do for a living?" And he goes, "I'm a flight attendant."
Huh.
And so I started chatting about that. I was like, "That sounds really interesting." And the aviation industry always seemed like a cool thing, but you see the pilots, you see the flight attendants in their uniform, and it's always at the time, as a young adult, I never even considered the possibility of that. It always seemed something like, I don't know, this unreachable thing that, you see all these people glammed up in their uniforms. I could never do that. And he said, "Yeah, you could do it. Just, go to this website and apply." And I was like, all right. I went to a recruiting website and saw that this legacy airline was hiring, applied. Surprisingly, they accepted my application, sent me to an interview. I think they flew me out to San Francisco. Yeah, they flew me to San Francisco, did an interview with a group of people, and they offered me a job on the spot. It was the fastest job offer I've ever had. But that kind of kicked off this amazing 4 years as a flight attendant that I had that eventually sent me off into investigating becoming a pilot. So that was kind of the long and short of it.
It's crazy how that happens. You're like, just chilling at Trader Joe's. One conversation
Yeah.
with a guy who says, no, it's possible. Just do XYZ. You do it. And then,
Yeah, you apply and you get it, and then you go to training, and all of a sudden you're working, and you're wearing the uniform, and you have the wings. It's kind of a crazy thing that I never envisioned myself doing, but it turned out to be one of the greatest. I think I'm in the greatest industry in the world right now.
that's so interesting that you never even thought, if you never thought to be a flight attendant, then you probably weren't thinking about being a pilot at the time either.
No, I mean, as a kid, I airplanes have always been fascinating to me. I've always been such a big aviation nerd
Hmm.
since I was a kid, but I never really thought that I could be a pilot. Eh, just the sheer amount of knowledge that I didn't have about what was realistically necessary to become a pilot. I never really thought that it was something that I could do. It
Hmm.
just seemed like it seemed like a I don't know, just this mountain of knowledge and experience that is something you could realistically do. And so I started doing that when I became a flight attendant, and I started exploring that avenue, and I started to realize as I started taking flight lessons that, oh, this could actually happen. This is a very possible thing to do.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. So you were a flight attendant at a legacy carrier for 4 years. Now you're doing your thing. You're the guy going to Norway now. You're flying around. What was there a moment that you were like, maybe I should take flight lessons? Like when did that come on the horizon? When did you start thinking about that?
It was on the flights, and I started just flying with pilots on the line, and I was like, how do you? I started just prodding them. What can I do? How do you get into this? And they said, just sign up for a discovery flight. There's flight schools. There's thousands of flight schools around the country. Do your research and give one a call that seems credible and safe. Take a discovery flight and see if you like it.
Can you define a
And
discovery flight for the people who are
yeah,
listening?
a discovery flight, yeah, for your listeners is basically just an introductory flight. They'll usually discount the cost of the flight. It's not long. They'll take you out, they'll walk you around the plane and point out kind of what we're looking for on the pre-flight inspection that you do. It's very introductory, and they take you in, and the whole idea of a discovery flight is just to kind of get you excited about flying. It's not necessarily learning as much. It's more of just, let's see how you do in a plane. Is this something that you could see yourself doing? Are you excited about it? Are you nervous? Are you a little bit of both? Or for me, I got in that plane, and the second we started up that engine and I did that first takeoff, I was hooked. There was no nervousness for me. I knew that this is what I wanted to do just from that first flight. I know that's not the same for
Awesome.
everybody, but that definitely was the case for me.
What year was that in your flight attendant journey that you took the discovery flight?
I could pull up my logbook right now, but I think it was 2017. It was a long time ago. So I was paying out of pocket. So I was flying very on and off
Mhm.
on a flight attendant salary. It was difficult to do, especially living in Southern California at the time, where everything is expensive, including and flight training is no exception to that. But I basically was just paying out of pocket, flight by flight, as often as I could. Not super often, but just every penny I had was kind of going towards that. And I basically the I got about 60 hours in when I discovered the American Airlines cadet program. And that's the next stage in it, which I applied to, and they facilitated the rest of that training on a more
What?
structured
Let's
on
talk
a more
about that
structured
for
thing.
if you became a flight attendant in 2015 and you started in 2017 exploring this flying thing, you were a flight attendant for 2 years, and then you're like,
Hmm.
"Ooh, I'm gonna go out and explore this." You're like hooked on the discovery, going for it. And then, of course,
Yeah,
with flight attendant pennies, you were like throwing them out at the training whenever you could and somehow worked up 60 hours.
60 hours. Yeah. So I was basically I had basically completed all the prerequisites to take the private pilot check ride,
Yes.
the practical test to get your private pilot license. And I was in the middle of scrounging up all that money when now we're in about 2018, 2019, when I discovered the cadet program,
Mm.
and I applied to that. They basically took my application. They looked at me and they said, "Let's fly this guy out to Dallas, interview him for the cadet program." And with another group of people, I interviewed with them. It was basically an all-day thing. They do one-on-one, they do group interviews, they do this aptitude test on the computer,
Mm.
and they eventually accepted me.
How
And the cadet
um
program,
on the cadet interview, how similar is that to like the flight attendant hiring event? Or is it similar at all?
I haven't done I haven't done a flight attendant interview since 2015, but I think it's pretty similar. There's an HR portion that
Mm.
I don't know if you guys have to take like an aptitude test online or anything like that, where it's designed to be it's designed to be mind-numbingly difficult. But they're just kind of to see kind of how far can I stretch myself. So they have you do that. There's an HR, tell me about a time, scenarios, all that kind of stuff. And they also like to see how you interact with other people, so they kind of observe your interaction with the group of other fellow interviewees in the room as well. And it's kind of an all-day ordeal, and it's very selective and very competitive. But if you do well on that, they will accept you into the program, and you go to a flight school that they have an agreement with around somewhere in the country that you can choose. And it's a lot more structured. You have a student loan that you take out for it. And I'm not a representative for the cadet program, but that's my basic understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it facilitates a lot more of a structured environment as opposed to paying out of pocket. And that really worked really well for me.
Mm.
And it gets you all your certificates and ratings a lot quicker, as opposed to doing it out of pocket. So everything's a lot more regulated and structured. So I did that from 2019 to 2020, 2021. I did my training,
Mm-hmm.
and then instructed from 2021 to 2022 to 2025, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So to get the rest of my hours and to get to the airlines.
Right. Oh, that is so cool. So I know right now you're giving us a story like this is what I did step by step, but I know there were a lot of decisions that had to be made. So for instance,
Mm-hmm.
you chose to apply to the cadet program. I know there's like ATP, or you could have kept funding it on your own. Why did you decide
Mm-hmm.
that route as opposed to something else?
The only two options were going to be ATP or the cadet program, and I knew that I wanted to do airlines from the beginning. So the cadet program just seemed like the most realistic way because of the you're not guaranteed a job at an airline for going through a cadet program, but it certainly helps.
Hmm.
So you can have that on your resume when you apply to a regional airline when you reach your hours.
Hmm.
So again, it's not again they make it very clear you're not guaranteed a job being in one of our cadet programs and doing this, but the fact that you have gone through our program, it certainly doesn't hurt.
Okay.
So I'm trying to be as careful about saying that as I can. So if I went through ATP, that's great. It's an accelerated program. It's going to get your ratings probably about just as fast as going through the program that American offers, but you didn't start with them. You didn't. So you're still kind of an off the street hire, whereas if you went through American, the cadet program, you're at least
You have some affiliation.
you're not you're yeah, you already have that relationship with them. You're not necessarily in, but you kind of have one step in already, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And that go and the same applies to United's cadet program, I'm assuming, and Delta's program and all that. I can't speak for them because I wasn't a part of it. None of that existed at the time when I applied, and that's the reason why I think if I remember correctly, the cadet program started in 2018,
Wow.
and I applied at the end of 2018 and then got accepted in 2019. I think I was like not the first group, but certainly among kind of the early applicants, and I know that has very much changed since then.
Okay.
It's grown and been, I don't know to what extent, but they're certainly constantly growing it and changing it
I mean,
and
2018
fine
is
tuning
fairly
it.
recent.
Yeah, I mean, how long is that?
About
Seven or
eight
eight
years now.
years? Yeah,
Yeah.
8 years. Yes.
Mhm.
So there's been a lot of time between then for them to kind of, they had a different loan provider, and now they kind of provide the loans from their credit union, and there's a lot of different things that they do now that I think are only better as they've grown,
Yeah.
but they've changed flight schools around but it looks a lot different now than it did back then, but it was great then, and I'm sure it's even better now.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about that, and I did see the credit union was one of their loan, well, their loan servicer, which leads me to one of my next questions is you basically just said like, okay, you went through the cadet program, but they made sure you knew that wasn't a guarantee that you were going to get a job. And you also
Hmm.
told me earlier that you took out a student loan or a loan to go through this program. And I'm
I
like,
did, yeah.
what gave you the confidence? Because here you are, you're taking out debt and you don't have a guarantee. Some people
Yeah.
will not jump into that. What was it about this that
Young naivete. I mean, I don't. Uh, yeah, I. I just I hmm, I ran this by a lot of people. My dad's a financial planner. I talked to him. I had him look at the loan. I had him look at the fine print of it all.
Mm,
I don't even I think if I'm being completely honest though, even if he said it wasn't a good idea, I probably still would have done it
mm,
because I just wanted to do this so bad that it was a decent offer. But even if it wasn't, I probably still would have done it because I just knew how badly I wanted to do this.
mm,
I would have, I would, I would have been in, uh, yeah. I don't really know how to speak much to that other than it was good enough. It was good enough for me to accept and risk
mm.
to try and do this. And it eventually worked out.
Clearly.
Um,
Yeah.
it eventually worked out. It wasn't easy. The loan payments were difficult. Um,
And you
but
actually said you got married kind of in this process too.
I did, yes. So, and the cadet program management, I guess, they were really great about it. So I think I interviewed and got accepted in October of 2018, and they wanted me to start as soon as possible. But I was getting married in February of 2019, and I said, "Hey, can we push this back several months? I really want to do this, but I have a wedding right on the horizon that is kind of taking up all my attention right now." And they said, "Absolutely." So I got married so I got married to my wife in 2019, and in February we had our wedding, had like a quick local not even a week long honeymoon. And
Mm.
then a week and a half later, we were packing up our life and moving to Memphis for training.
Whew.
So we got married. And then like a week and a half later, we were driving across the country to Memphis to my accelerated training to all this. So it was a wild whirlwind for both of us as newlyweds with barely any money trying to make it across the country to do all this. It was a lot, and we figured it out together.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly helped when I was training that she was also working she was kind of the breadwinner while I was training and going full time as a student.
Wow. That's great. A little partnership never hurts.
No, it doesn't, and it was really great that that we had some the basically the way we paid for living at the time for those 2.5 3 years of training was from her job.
Okay. Okay. I was
Yeah,
wondering about that. Like, how'd you live? So the loan probably just covered tuition, not living expenses. Is that right?
there was a stipend. There was a stipend stipulation involved that you could increase the amount your loan principal for a stipend to help pay for your cost of live for to help pay for your rent.
Got it.
Again, it wasn't a great deal because that increased the principal amount and by extension the interest
That's right.
on it. So those are things that have to be considered if this is something you want to do, because when the time comes to pay that loan back, it's going to be a lot, depending on if you take that housing loan out and stuff like that.
Mm,
So it all depends on if it's something that you feel comfortable signing.
okay. So take us through a little bit of how do I want to phrase this? Because it's kind of a question in two parts. One, I want to know what the kind of day to day of it, once you were in the swing of it and you were doing your training, what that was like. And then what you
Mhm.
think someone who would want to do the same thing that you did, what they would need to get through that. Like a couple things you feel like they would need to get through.
Okay, yeah. So flight training in general is divided up into two types of sets of regulation. There's Part 141 training and there's Part 61 training. That refers to the federal air regulations. But basically, one is what I was doing initially, which is paying out of pocket. That's Part 61, just going to a run of the mill flight school and paying out of pocket, paying my way through. And then there's 141, which is it's basically an FAA approved flight school that has a strict FAA approved learning curriculum that you go through. The hourly requirements can be different, but you're you don't have as much freedom in doing whatever you want to do. You're kind of each lesson is a specific lesson as mandated by the FAA. So you get there quicker, but it's a lot more structured. So there's a little bit of give and take there. So through the cadet program, I went 141, did all my training. Those are the two types. For someone who wants to go through flight training, they need to ask themselves, how do I learn? What's my learning style? If you do not, if you think you're someone that doesn't really adapt well to a fast paced kind of hit the ground running with deadlines on when you need to be ready for certain milestones in your training, 141 might not be for you. You might have to take the slower route, which is the Part 61 route, but it'll still get you there. It's just a little more difficult financially, and you don't have that structure there in place. But even for me, I don't think I was super tailored to the just how fast things happened at that flight school. It was a phenomenal flight school, but the demand for how quickly I needed to obtain that knowledge, it was really hard. It was a challenge. I'm not going to lie. And the good side to that is that airline training is no different. You have to know certain things by this date,
Mm.
and so it's really 141. That kind of training environment really did a good job preparing me for what the airline's expectations were. No doubt about it,
Mm.
because it was a fire hose of knowledge. There 141 training is like 6 years of knowledge, condensed down into 2 to 3. And same with airline training. Airline training is, a several years of training condensed down into 5 weeks.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's that demanding. And so just because you take the loan, just because you committed to this program, this 141 program, doesn't mean you're going to succeed, and you have to be willing to take that risk.
I wonder about this. So I don't know what kind of student you were, but there are some students, like in high school, you did really well and you didn't have to try. So then you go out in the real world and you encounter a challenge and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I'm not used to
Mhm.
things actually being hard. So you go to flight, I
Yeah.
don't know what kind of student you were, but you go to this flight thing and you're like, this is actually hard. Like, how
Mhm.
do you navigate that? Obviously you got through it. How did you do that?
That's a good question. I wasn't a great student academically. I was decent in college. High school, I was really not there. I really struggled in high school and middle school and all that. I guess for me, I can only speak for me that when I find a field of study that really interests me, I'm excited to learn about it. And there were things within flight training that I was like, I wasn't super enthusiastic about learning about, but there were other things that I was really excited to learn about, and I was happy to divert my attention to that. I also was very familiar with my learning style. And when I was in flight training, I explored every possible way under the sun to learn. I tried the flashcard method. The, I mean, I tried everything. And so I kind of tailored all these different ways to see what stuck with me the best. So if you go through this accelerated program, just really experiment, if you haven't already, with what your learning style is and what works for you.
Hmm.
Like when I was studying for my flight instructor exam, I would sit my wife down and I would teach her because she doesn't know anything about aviation. So I'd be like, how can I break this down to the
Mhm.
bare basics, to the most fundamental levels, and to a language that she can understand?
Yeah.
And so I would practice on her, and I would practice on other people, my parents, and
Yeah.
people who just don't know a single thing, and then I would ask them, does this make sense to you? And until they said, yes, it does, I would keep working on it. There are things like that. Communication is key within this industry, and you got to learn to speak, to break down your speech to the most fundamental, basic level of talking. To someone else that is interested in this, there's two things. I would recommend that they do some research, find a local flight school that has good reviews and has a good track record, that's not just out there to get your money, but genuinely wants to teach you how to fly, and take a discovery flight and see how you respond to it. Are there any surprises? Did you expect yourself to have a good time, but then you got in that plane and took off and found yourself having a lot more, you were a lot more nervous than you expected yourself to be? That's very common. Work through that, and then sign up for a medical certificate and make sure that there are no medically disqualifying things that prevent you from doing this long term. You need to have a first class medical certificate to be an airline pilot. And if that's something you want to do, then find a aviation medical examiner, go through the medical certification process and get that medical certificate so that you know that there is nothing preventing you from doing this, rather than 50, 60, 70 plus hours down the line, thousands of dollars down the drain.
Yeah, those hours
And
can be
then,
expensive.
and then you find out you're not medically qualified in the first place. That's where you don't want to find yourself. So get that medical certificate first so that you don't run into issues down the road.
Yeah, that's a great advice. I took a little tangent down this road myself, and when I went to go get my medical, it ended up getting deferred because I had been on a medication before.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they did issue me a medical with a special issuance, but it was
Mhm.
a whole process, and I needed so much advice and all this, but it ended
Yeah.
up working
And it
out.
can take months or years for them to approve it too.
Yep.
They're
Very
going to move at
cool.
whatever the pace that they want to move at. Sometimes it can be a few weeks, which is on a good day for some people. But I found for the most part, like I've had students that I started training with them, and then they would have to stop, and then they would contact me like a year later and be like, I finally got my medical
That
certificate.
that was me.
So yeah, so it can take a really long time, and you don't want to run into that right before a check ride or something like that.
That's right. Dave, I'm so inspired by you. You went from being at Trader Joe's, not even thinking that this was a thing, and now you're teaching other people about it. And I think people are really going to benefit from hearing your story. It's so cool.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Layover Podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, follow. You can also leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps me know what you're enjoying hearing, what you'd like to hear more of, some topics I can factor in for the next episodes coming in the future. We have some really good stuff on the way, so I hope you'll tune in for that. And remember, sometimes you have to lay over to go further.